The morning sun crested over the ridge, casting long golden beams across the community of Maplewood Ridge as I steered my brand-new Rolls-Royce Phantom down the smooth paved street. The majestic V12 engine purred like a sleeping lion beneath the hood, while I carefully maneuvered my pride and joy into my freshly sealed concrete driveway. The car gleamed under the sunlight, reflecting the morning rays like a moving jewel, making it stand out amongst the cookie-cutter minivans, sedans, and SUVs parked up and down the neighborhood. Maplewood Ridge was one of those places where appearances mattered. Too much. Everything here had to conform. Lawn heights, mailbox designs, fence colors, even Christmas decorations. And looming over all these rules like an iron-fisted monarch stood Karen Whitlock, the self-declared queen of the HOA. Her power was legendary, her rule unchallenged. Until now. Though I had only moved into Maplewood Ridge a few weeks earlier, I knew very well what I was walking into. I had researched this HOA meticulously. My legal team had reviewed every covenant, every rule, every amendment. I was a businessman, and my purchase of this property was deliberate. I had specifically chosen Maplewood Ridge not for its lush scenery or its meticulously maintained lawns, but to make a very specific point, that tyrannical HOA leaders like Karen could be challenged. But Karen saw my arrival as a direct threat to her authority. As I exited the Rolls-Royce and casually adjusted my cufflinks, I noticed movement from across the street. There she was, Karen Whitlock herself, standing at attention like a sentinel, her eyes locked on my vehicle with a mix of horror, fury, and indignation. Her tablet clutched in one hand, phone in the other, she was already snapping photos like some amateur private investigator trying to build a case. She stormed across her perfectly trimmed lawn, lips tightly pursed, practically vibrating with righteous fury. Her signature wide-brimmed sun hat sat atop her head, her pearl necklace bouncing with each angry step. "Excuse me," she barked as she approached, her tone sharp enough to cut steel. "What on earth is that monstrosity doing? Here?" "Good morning," I replied smoothly, keeping my tone calm, even pleasant. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" "Don't play games with me," she hissed. "That car violates our HOA standards. It's unsightly. It doesn't fit the image of this community." I smiled slightly, fully aware of the legal groundwork I had prepared for this exact confrontation. I reviewed the HOA charter thoroughly before purchasing this home. Nowhere does it state that luxury vehicles are prohibited, Karen. Her face twitched as her name escaped my lips. She hated being addressed so casually, as though her title of HOA president had not earned her some automatic elevated respect. "This isn't about the make or model," she sneered. "It's about decorum. That thing draws unnecessary attention. It sends the wrong message about our community." I could see her neighbors starting to peek out from behind curtains and half-open doors, drawn to the drama that was unfolding. "Well, my driveway is part of my private property," I said calmly, "and as long as I maintain it per the covenant standards, you have no authority over my choice of automobile." Karen's jaw flexed as she clenched her teeth. "I run the HOA. You don't get to redefine the rules." "That's correct. You run the HOA, but not the state's property, laws, or the federal code. My property rights are not yours to interpret. If you believe otherwise, you're welcome to pursue it legally." For a moment, Karen stood frozen, practically vibrating in frustration. She wasn't used to people talking back. Most neighbors simply cowered under her authority. But I wasn't like them. She had finally met resistance. Suddenly, she stepped back and whipped out her phone. "Fine, you leave me no choice," she shouted as her thumb danced across the screen. I folded my arms, watching silently as she dialed 911. 911, what is your emergency?" came the operator's voice, audible to nearby neighbors now gathering discreetly at their porches. "This is Karen Whitlock, HOA president of Maplewood. Ridge. There's an individual here causing a disturbance on private property. He's trespassing, threatening me, and driving an unauthorized vehicle that violates safety standards." Her blatant lies caught me off guard for only a second before I composed myself again. I didn't interrupt. Let her dig her own grave. "Is he armed or dangerous?" the operator asked. "He's belligerent," Karen shrieked. "Please send officers quickly before this situation escalates." By the time she hung up, the neighborhood's energy had shifted entirely. People whispered nervously, some raising their phones to record the interaction, probably sensing that this was about to get much uglier. 15 minutes later, 2 police cruisers quietly rolled into the street. Their lights weren't flashing, but the tension was thick as they parked in front of my home. Out stepped Officers Daniels and Morales, professionals who looked seasoned, enough to instantly recognize the difference between a real emergency and a neighborhood spat. Karen immediately charged toward them. "Officers, thank God you're here. That man right there is trespassing, violating HOA regulations, and creating a public disturbance." The officers glanced at me, noting my calm posture, clean appearance, and expensive suit, then back at Karen's flushed, manic face. "Sir, can we see some identification and property documentation?" Officer Daniels asked politely. "Of course." I handed him my driver's license and my property deed, already prepared for this moment. After reviewing the paperwork for several long moments, Officer Daniels looked back at Karen. "Ma'am, Mr. Carter owns this property legally as of last month. His vehicle is also legally registered to this address. There's no trespassing here." Karen's face went white. But the HOA! He's violating HOA guidelines." "We are not here to enforce HOA policies, ma'am," Officer Morales interjected firmly. "HOA violations are civil matters, not criminal offenses." But he threatened me," she exclaimed desperately. Officer Daniels turned back to me. "Sir, did you make any threats?" I shook my head calmly. "No, officers. In fact, she's been aggressive from the start. There are multiple witnesses, including my security cameras." By now, several neighbors had edged closer, nodding silently. The officers noticed the support behind me. "Ma'am," Officer Daniels continued, "filing a false police report is a serious offense. This could result in legal charges if repeated." Karen was now flustered, stumbling over her words, realizing that her attempt to weaponize law enforcement had completely backfired. The police left after advising both parties to resolve HOA matters civilly through proper legal channels. As they departed, Karen stood in the middle of the street, humiliated, shaking with rage. But I knew better. She wasn't done yet. This was only her opening salvo, and so began the real war between Karen and me. The days following the police incident were filled with an eerie calm that barely concealed the brewing storm. Karen Whitlock had tasted defeat, but not surrender. Her pride was wounded, and I knew she was plotting her next move. In the meantime, I made no effort to antagonize her further, continuing my daily routine, driving my Rolls-Royce proudly through Maplewood Ridge as if nothing had happened. But beneath that calm exterior, I was preparing as well, fully aware that the HOA president wouldn't let this go without escalating the conflict. I installed additional security cameras, fortified my legal team, and gathered extensive documentation of every interaction, violation, and complaint lodged against me. I was ready for whatever Karen had in store. True to my prediction, just a week later, I received an official certified letter from the Maplewood Ridge Homeowners Association, complete with Karen's signature and the HOA's embossed seal. The letter accused me of multiple violations: improper vehicle storage, disrupting neighborhood aesthetics, failure to conform to community standards, and engaging in behavior detrimental to community harmony. It was a beautifully crafted piece of bureaucratic intimidation. Every word carefully chosen to sound authoritative while being legally flimsy. I handed the letter to my attorney, Mr. Fletcher, who chuckled as he read through it. They're reaching, he said. There's nothing here they can enforce without a lengthy legal battle they're unlikely to win. Good, I replied. Let's prepare our response. But quietly. I want them to feel like they're winning. Over the following weeks, Karen began ramping up her campaign. Anonymous complaints started flooding the HOA board, no doubt orchestrated by Karen and her loyal inner circle. Petty infractions were cited, my grass being half an inch too tall, my outdoor lighting being too bright, my security cameras being visually disruptive. She even tried to fine me for leaving my trash bins out 5 minutes past collection time. Each time, my legal team responded with meticulous rebuttals, citing both HOA bylaws and state law, systematically dismantling every accusation. My neighbors watched in growing amazement at how methodically I countered each baseless claim. But Karen wasn't satisfied with playing by the rules she pretended to enforce. One evening, as I reviewed paperwork in my study, I noticed movement on my security monitors. 2 figures dressed in dark clothing were sneaking around the side of my property. I immediately called the sheriff's office and waited, watching, as they tampered with my exterior light fixtures and attempted to spray paint one of my security cameras. The police arrived swiftly, catching the culprits in the act. As it turned out, they were teenage sons of 2 HOA board members, both close friends of Karen. The boys claimed it was a prank, but their actions were criminal. Their parents pleaded with me not to press charges, but I refused to back down. This wasn't about vandalism, it was about sending a message. Karen was clearly weaponizing her influence to harass me into submission, and I intended to expose it. The sheriff's investigation unearthed a string of coordinated efforts led by Karen herself, encouraging others to file false complaints, coordinating harassment, and even offering rewards for evidence of my non-compliance. As evidence mounted, the situation snowballed into a full-scale scandal. Local journalists uncovered how Karen manipulated HOA funds for personal use, throwing extravagant parties and vacations under the guise of community events. These exposés led to state regulators becoming involved, launching an investigation into the HOA's finances. A storm of legal troubles hovered above Karen, and board members resigned rapidly, hoping to distance themselves before the inevitable collapse. The neighborhood's gossip circles buzzed with every new revelation, and Karen's iron grip loosened daily. With the HOA destabilized, Karen became increasingly desperate. She attempted a final, bold maneuver, organizing a special emergency HOA meeting to vote on forcibly revoking my membership and seizing my property rights through an obscure clause buried deep within the HOA's original charter, a clause that predated several legal reforms and was almost certainly unenforceable. Flyers were distributed, social media posts created, and a propaganda campaign launched to vilify me as a threat to the neighborhood's peace. I attended the meeting calmly, bringing with me a full legal team, a private investigator, and a small army of neighbors who had grown tired of Karen's reign. The community center was packed, tension thick in the air. Karen stood at the podium, her voice shaky but determined as she tried to justify her drastic actions. "We cannot allow this man to continue undermining our community," she declared, her voice rising with desperation. "He has flaunted our rules, brought disrepute upon Maplewood Ridge, and endangered the cohesion we have worked so hard to build." I remained silent until my attorney, Mr. Fletcher, requested the floor. Calmly and professionally, he laid out the evidence: Karen's misuse of power, her orchestration of harassment, the illegal vandalism campaign, and her multiple violations of state and federal law. The private investigator provided detailed reports, and the sheriff's office corroborated the criminal complaints. The room fell into a stunned silence. Several board members quietly slipped out, unwilling to be associated with Karen any longer. Finally, I addressed the room directly. "I came here fully aware of the HOA's authority and its responsibility to maintain standards," I said. But no HOA, no matter how powerful, has the right to trample on individual rights, to use its rules as weapons for personal vendettas. This community deserves better leadership. My words resonated with the community, many of whom had suffered silently under Karen's tyranny for years. Neighbors recounted personal stories of unjust fines, threats, and harassment under Karen's rule. The once powerful HOA president stood helplessly as residents turned against her one by one. The vote to remove me failed spectacularly. Instead, several homeowners moved to hold a no-confidence vote against Karen. With overwhelming support, she was ousted from her position as HOA president that very night. The following days saw a wave of reforms. New board members were elected, residents who valued fairness over control. Karen, now stripped of her power and facing multiple lawsuits, sold her home and quietly moved away. Her reign of terror finally ended. But even after Karen's departure, there was much work to be done. The HOA's finances had to be audited, policies rewritten, and trust rebuilt among neighbors. I volunteered to serve as a temporary advisor to the new board, sharing my experience to help create a transparent and accountable organization. Community meetings became open forums for discussion, with every homeowner having a voice. The toxic culture that Karen had fostered slowly dissolved, replaced by mutual respect and cooperation. New community events flourished, from farmers' markets to charity drives, creating a newfound sense of unity. Word of Maplewood Ridge's transformation spread beyond the neighborhood. Other HOA-governed communities reached out for advice on how to reform their own governance, inspired by our success. I received letters and emails from people across the state who had faced similar HOA tyrants, thanking me for standing up and giving them hope. State legislators even consulted our experiences as they drafted new laws to limit HOA overreach and protect homeowners from similar abuses of power. With every new sunrise, Maplewood Ridge flourished. Property values soared, not because of strict enforcement, but because people genuinely wanted to live here. The community spirit was alive and thriving, with neighbors helping neighbors, kids playing freely, and people proudly displaying their unique styles without fear of retaliation. My Rolls-Royce became less a symbol of defiance and more a symbol of perseverance, freedom, and the right to live without tyranny. As I stood on my driveway weeks later, watching children ride their bikes freely and neighbors chatting happily, I couldn't help but smile as the sun once again reflected brilliantly off my Rolls-Royce. This wasn't just a victory for me. It was a victory for everyone who had ever suffered under unchecked HOA tyranny. And as the soft hum of my car's engine filled the air, I knew Maplewood Ridge would never be the same again. The battle was over. But the legacy of standing up for personal freedom and fairness would endure for generations to come. Maplewood Ridge had become a beacon, a shining example of what a community could achieve when ordinary people stood together against corruption.